Hallo und herzlich willkommen. Hier lernst du alles rund um das Thema Investor Relations, Fundraising und Kapitalmarkt. Mein Name ist Julia Stötzl und ich bin Gründerin und CEO von Investor Relations Beratung Unicorn. Unicorn ist auf einer Mission, Investor Relations für die nächste Generation einzuführen. Das bedeutet ganz konkret die Integration von digitalen Medien wie zum Beispiel LinkedIn, Podcast, Newsletter in die klassische Kapitalmarktarbeit. Mehr Informationen zu Unicorn, aber auch zum Podcast findest du unter unicornconsulting.com. Und jetzt wünsche ich euch viel Spaß beim Zuhören.
So this is already episode 9's deep dive, and today we have a very special guest with us, Angelika Horstmeier. We actually know each other from, I don't even know, I think it was 2018 or something, preparation AGM, the Deliver Hero. Could I be right? I don't know, but we know each other definitely for quite some time already, being both in the industry for some time. So maybe to give you a brief introduction to Angelika, whoever doesn't know her yet. She has over 20 years of experience in bringing listed companies and their shareholders together on current ESG topics. She joined Alliance Advisors roughly 1 year ago after having worked for 14 years at S&P Global Market Intelligence, that was previously also known as IHS Market. And she has recently supported numerous clients in the recent shareholder meeting season 2023. And she will provide us today with some great insights onto the topic of shareholder identification and preparation of shareholder meetings, and gives us some tips that are deserving attention for the upcoming season, some practical tips, and how to avoid negative surprises for the next time around. So that's quite a hot topic. Thank you so much for being with us, Angelika. And maybe over to you. So maybe I gave already quite some introduction, but maybe you can give us a little bit of background on yourselves and what you're doing with listed companies and their shareholders.
Sure. Thank you, Julia. It's a pleasure to be here. And I think it's a really cool format to do it like this. So
thank you.
To talk about the shareholder meeting season is something that's very of age at this moment in time, because yesterday, I think one of the most anticipated shareholder meetings was held, which was the Brenntag shareholder meeting. Brenntag was under attack by a few shareholders of different opinion to the management. And this is something that I think is almost one of the last shareholder meetings of this season. The companies have all held their annual general meeting already in 2023. Now, it used to be something where you would, or somebody like me would help companies just around the shareholder meeting itself. So looking at maybe one particular topic, maybe they wanted to increase their capital and they knew that their capital or that the ask for the capital was maybe too much in comparison to guidelines of investors. Maybe it was a board election or something like that. Most of the time it used to be, many years ago, it used to be the increase of the capital presence. So making sure that the capital presence number that is finally published by the company is a high one. And that is something that has been historically the case. What I found, of course, over the last many years, but I would say maybe the last 5 years or so, the dialogue has actually changed. The requirements from investors has changed to a year-round service. So the shareholder meeting is really only the end of a very long process.
Yeah, absolutely. I can definitely subscribe to that. I think some companies fall into the pitfall that it's, they just start just before the AGM season to engage on certain governance topics, but it's really, you should do that all year round and keep your investors happy. So there's no things upcoming just before that, right?
Exactly.
Maybe let's dive a little bit deeper in. Obviously, you have a lot of experience on that topic. How would you say has the communication between shareholders and companies changed along the way over the last few years?
So I talked a little bit about it already, right? So it used to be much more issuer driven. So the companies would look at their shareholders just before the shareholder meeting and maybe speak to one or two of them and discuss some of the agenda items that were being proposed at the shareholder meeting. Nowadays, it's changed a lot. So there's two ways. One is that companies, that there's certain agenda items that will always be on the agenda, such as the discharge of the management and the supervisory board. You have your dividend. You maybe have your board elections on a more regular cycle than it used to be. You have to ask for capital, this and that. So it's something that is already on the investor's mind and on everybody's mind way before the shareholder meeting. And it's something that is often used as the outlet for some of the communication that happens throughout the year. Now, on the other side, if we flip it around to the way that it's changed from the investor perspective, is that the beneficial owners, so the money givers that give their money to be managed by somebody like BlackRock, for example, or Vanguard, some of the really massive passive funds, they now stipulate what the agenda is, and they now say, well, with our money, with our asset, we want you to vote in a certain way. We want you to engage with a company, with the investee companies in a certain way on this particular topic. There's some really cool letters, for example, that are being published by BlackRock and by State Street every year, the Larry Fink letter.
Yes, exactly. On ESG especially, yeah.
Exactly. And they talk about, this is our topic for this year. We talk, this year it's diversity levels that the company has set. And this is what we're going to engage on with you. And we're going to make you responsible for it as well if you don't have it. And that's a very open dialogue. And it gives you a lot of warning, but also something that companies have to listen to. If you just ignore this sort of behavior, or you ignore the letters, you ignore the communication in the press, and then BlackRock is your number 2 shareholder, they vote against your nomination committee because you didn't listen to the letter, for example, then it's not a good outcome.
Can you give just a background, whoever doesn't know, when are these letters being published? How much ahead of the AGM season?
So again, it's like a year-round process. So the day after your shareholder meeting is the first day before your next one. So you've got to, as a company, you've got to just keep the momentum going. A lot of times shareholders communicate with the companies just before the shareholder meeting because they want to know how they can vote, or they have a particular question. That's a great moment to pick up the stick already for just after the shareholder meeting to say, hey, now we can sit down with a little bit more time. We don't have an imminent vote, but let's talk about the long-term plan for the company and the future. The letters, I think they normally come out in the fall. So there's still that little bit of a summer break. People have their holidays and things like that and wipe the sweat from their faces after the shareholder meeting. But then you've got to start. You can't just start a couple of months before the shareholder meeting. So it's really something that should be almost a year-round service, if not at least 3/4 of the year before.
Very interesting. So maybe let's dive a little bit more into the last season, the 2023 season that you just kind of closed almost, I would say. What were the wins and fails from an issuer perspective during those AGMs that you were holding and supporting?
Well, this year was really interesting. We had some agenda items that didn't look great on the ballot when we actually had the voting results announced from the companies. One of them was the virtual shareholder meeting, the introduction of the option to have the virtual shareholder meeting. There's been a lot of press about this in Germany in particular. In other markets, maybe not so much. But what we found is from the behavior and from the dissenting rates on this agenda item is that it was mostly German institutional shareholders that dissented on this particular agenda item and said, we don't think this is in a way valuing our shareholder rights, because also German shareholders are very great at actually presenting themselves at the shareholder meeting, asking a lot of critical questions, wanting to have the answer. That is something that, in a virtual format is maybe not granted in the same manner. Yeah. So those agenda items had quite a bit of dissent. You'll see it when you look at the voting results of some of the companies this year. And also there was actually quite a lot of French shareholders that didn't like the idea either and voted against. This is something that's not going to return, though. This is something that was a one-off. It was this year. And so that's the explanation when you look at the voting results. Now, other things actually are going to carry on also into 2024. I think the biggest one that I've seen so far, and not everybody's published their results yet, is the remuneration report vote. Remuneration has been on everybody's mind for a long time. And unsurprisingly, over the years that we've been voting on this in Germany, in the German market, is investors have also educated themselves a lot more, have got much more detailed guidelines on what they want to see from the companies. Yeah. Do they want to see disclosure of the targets before they're reached or after they have been reached? What is the comparison from peer to peer? And so what we've seen this year, you'll see it again in a study that we're also about to publish on the post-season report, is that there's been quite a lot of dissent on the remuneration reports, and the majority of those that didn't get a 90 or an 80% plus vote are really companies that either have been paying maybe excessively in terms of bonus payouts and not disclosing the way that the management has reached that bonus. Another one, which is also something that we're increasingly seeing, is that investors really want to see specific targets in the LTIPs, for example. So ESG targets, right? Everybody's talking about ESG, but so the management should also be compensated for reaching certain ESG targets. Those are really the biggest ones. That we're going to see as a wrap up of this season in Germany, but also we've seen some really great communication from companies. So we've seen some for example, some board elections, right? So there may be a board where somebody wants to be elected and they've been on the board for a very long time, and it might be going against other investors' guidelines to vote again for this person. And what we've seen is if that person or if that candidate actually goes out and reaches out to shareholders with open arms and says, this is the reason why I want to carry on this board, or this is why, I am the best candidate for this job, then there is a lot of trust also that investors give companies, and a lot of open arms to really support the company in their current situation and be part of their story. So not being so stringent with the guidelines. It's on certain topics it is, and on certain topics we see a lot of flexibility, which is also really nice to see.
Super interesting. I do have two follow-up questions that is a little bit off script now, which I usually don't do because we have quite a set time frame. But anyways, what would you say? You said that if companies only reach like an 80-90% confirmation level at the AGM, what would you say is a good, what is still considered to be a good voting outcome, and what is already considered a bad one? And the second question is, why do you think remuneration is getting such a hot topic? Is it because of topics like ESG, or what's the real reason?
Yeah, so it used to be if you don't get 90% or 99%, then there's something wrong. Even if you get 95% support rate, something is wrong. And that is just something that I think nowadays also issuers in the German market are very much used to the fact that the 95% is even quite an achievement. And that is also because we have a huge amount of different investors often investing in a certain company, and they could be, from all over the world with different types of a style, and with everybody with a different kind of guideline that they might be applying to the same topic. So if you expect everybody to have the same opinion, that's also kind of not something that's realistic anymore. There's a number that's floating about in people's mind, or in people's guidelines also, which is the 80%. So if you receive 80% and plus in terms of support, then that is something that I would say is successful.
Yeah.
If you receive more than, so for example, BlackRock, but also some of the proxy advisors have this in their guidelines, especially on a remuneration report vote. If you receive more than 20% dissent on an agenda item, or on that particular agenda item, then it shows you that there is reasonable amount of dissent. It's not just one, it's several shareholders that are voting against this agenda item. And therefore, there's an expectancy for the company to actually acknowledge this dissent, and then in theory to also do something about this at the next shareholder meeting, especially if it was a remuneration report, to look at the system that created that report, and to maybe see if there's something fundamentally that investors are wanting to see that you haven't included or are not including for whatever reason. So that is that. And I think remuneration is really, at this moment in time, it's a topic where a lot of it is being clustered together. A lot of the reasons why shareholders are voting against is really, one is just comparison to other systems. So comparison maybe also to other markets where there's more disclosure. So you want to see as much disclosure. If I'm going to vote on your performance, I will gladly give you the amount of money that you may have earned, but tell me why you earned it, and tell me how this fits into the overall strategy of the company. And I think that's where companies, they've gone a very long way, but we still have a long way to go in terms of actually just standardizing this, I guess. So it's really where the majority of the dissent comes from. It's because we don't have the answer from one company is not the answer for the next company, and that's the issue.
Right, super interesting. Let's change gears a little bit. Let's start a bit basic. So what are proxy advisors exactly? Like, for example, ISS and Glass Lewis, and what role are they playing in influencing the vote of investors really?
Yeah, so we have two international proxy advisors that are often named in the press. So we have ISS, Institutional Shareholder Services, and Glass Lewis. Mm-hmm. And then we also, in Germany in particular, we have iVox that also writes some vote recommendations for the German shareholder meetings. There's obviously in other markets, there's also a lot of local proxy advisors that will only be relevant to that particular market. So we talk about, let's talk about ISS and Glass Lewis as the sort of the main ones. They take the agenda of a company. So the company has published their invitation to the shareholder meeting, and they take this and they will recommend their clients to vote either in favor or against an agenda item. And that is something that has been a very long ongoing process. Every year it's refined with consulting with their own clients. But, often the guidelines will be also that they are published online, so everybody can have a look and see what they are assessed against. And I think especially for companies that are maybe new to the market, it's quite a new process. But you have to be aware of this process. You have to be aware of the guidelines because these proxy advisors have basically every institutional investor as their client. There's hardly any investors out there that do not at least read the report. They might not follow it blind, but at least to read it. So the influence that they have is still fantastic. They have a lot of reach, and they also help a lot of investors that are maybe much smaller to just cover the bulk of the shareholder meetings, to actually be able to vote and to facilitate the vote. And to do all of that research. I mean, imagine having to do 5,000 meetings worth of research. Then the team that you would have is huge. So that's what a proxy advisor does, and their influence has in the past historically has been very great. And there's been some negative press about them as well, saying, "Hey, ISS is controlling my shareholder base by saying by recommending to vote against an agenda item." I think we don't give investors enough credit nowadays. So there's actually such a great move in a way to become independent from the recommendations, still utilizing them. They're a really good tool, almost like a screen. And then if ISS has picked something up or Glass Lewis has picked something up and flagged something to the investor, they go in and they overlay their guidelines and look much deeper into that topic. But it helps them cover the vast masses of investment that they have and voting those shareholdings, which is what we all want to see. But on the other hand, also the guidelines and the opinions and the engagement that the investors have been doing over the last few years has been much more detailed and often is much more critical than the proxy advisors guidelines.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I mean, I also see it more like it's really a proxy, right? Like it's someone who's kind of covering all of the investors, and some investors will go the extra mile and maybe do even a more thorough analysis or regulations, and some don't. They just follow kind of the lead, right?
Yeah, and I think usually the ones that follow it completely are the ones that don't have the big team yet.
Exactly.
That don't have the resources. So it's just that. And then those that have over the years really grown, and there's some teams out there that have, 60 people in it, working in it. They have the resources and they have the tools already internally to actually do all of this analysis.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about the juicy stuff. So the AGM is one occasion where investor activists are getting active, but not only, but mainly. And also we do have some individual people, I guess, that are kind of disruptive to the AGM in general, like individuals that do want to perhaps get some monetary compensation out of certain processes. Can you elaborate a little bit on that and why the AGM is such a preferred way to go about that?
It's like the melting pot, right? So the AGM, it's such a nice thing also, right? Because you meet a lot of your other shareholders, you see the board, everybody holds a speech, etc. And it's a nice way to get together on the journey of the company for the last year. But often and this is just a message for everybody, if you get those negative votes at the shareholder meeting and you don't know who they are from, and maybe an agenda item is only getting, let's say, 70% approval or 60% approval, you've got to ask yourself the question of where did the dialogue collapse? And it's about this engagement and talking to people, not at the last minute, but building a relationship and then fostering a dialogue on all things relating to non-financials. So the financial is completely set to another side, but talking about your governance story, talking about what you're doing to help your board succession plan, to maybe thinking about some acquisitions, or talking about the diversity levels, what you're doing. Maybe you are not quite there yet, but you're planning on doing it like this. And using your investors also, but also any other market participants as your sparring partner, and actually finding out from them what do you see. And they're so super open about giving you feedback as the issuer, and saying, well, look at your peers, look at them, how they're doing it in Spain, for example. They've done a great way of communicating. And that is like the ideal dialogue. So if at the shareholder meeting you have this, you have this surprise, and don't be surprised, because it's often something that has been building for quite a while. Now you asked also about like activists, right? So when does an investor turn? Right, so an investor, we've just seen it, but there's also there's some investors that are known for being activists, but there's also some traditional, historically very inactive investors that are now coming onto the limelight and are supporting shareholder proposals, and that is often it's another way. It's not a collapse, but it's often a result of a disconnect in the dialogue, or the investor trying to engage for a certain time frame. So I was at a conference recently where APG, the Dutch pension fund, they said, we will engage for a certain amount of years. We will have a behind the doors closed dialogue with the company management to talk about some of the things we want to improve. And you know what? After 5 years, if the company hasn't heard it and they are not showing us any sort of improvements in these ways, we turn.
Yeah.
We then take it public and we take something to the shareholder meeting again. So it's always about a much, much longer process that was actually supposed to maybe be held in a very friendly way before this negative vote turns up at the shareholder meeting.
Right. Yeah. And then it obviously builds in public and the pressure is real, right?
Yeah. And that's not very nice. No.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah.
Maybe you can touch upon a little bit about individuals that are kind of making a business out of going to AGMs and kind of putting on, I don't want to say show, but they're kind of asking critical questions on public. They keep asking to kind of also and lengthen the AGM. Can you talk a bit about that in case anyone who doesn't know about it yet, and what to do also as a company about it?
So that's the German shareholder meeting culture. You don't really find this in any other market. We work with companies also in the UK or in Asia, and the German shareholder meeting is often a very long event. It can be from the morning till the evening. And in a way, it's a fantastic idea. The idea is that every shareholder can ask the board a question, and the board has to answer. And I think, ultimately, this is what our society is all about, and this is what it should be. However, if the questions are, 40-page long, and then there's 40 other shareholders standing behind me wanting to ask also their 40 questions, you start to beg the question of why didn't you ask these questions at another time, right? Why does it have to be now in public and everybody has to wait here to see when they can vote? So I think it has to be the balance of the two. On one hand, holding the board responsible is something that is an integral part of shareholder democracy, and it should be supported. And I am a great supporter of it. I think it's a wonderful idea. However, keep it in relation. Keep it in relation to the shareholding stake. But also to the overall event. And I think for we have some great associations in Germany that have bundled these sort of questions that often engage on behalf of a lot of private shareholders, such as DSV or SDK, for example, and they will take the pressure off all of these individuals, but they will just conglomerate it or what do you say? Yeah, you put it all together into one, and then just ask your 20 questions, and then it's done. So yeah, it's about just finding a smart way to address it, because again, everybody should have a voice, everybody should be able to ask their questions, but maybe think about doing it on a much more year-round process as well.
Yeah, got it. Let's talk about those companies that do want to seek for professional help in the preparation of an AGM or even throughout the year. How can they reach, for example, companies like Alliance Advisors, and what should be a first meeting look like? Like, what information do you need from them to kind of proceed and help them best?
So I think that the most important thing, especially if you haven't done this before, so a lot of companies have a very established engagement process. They have a team that does this, and the investor also. So it's a great way of meeting of minds. But a lot of companies also are maybe new to the market or don't have the regular reporting and the regular engagement. The first thing is to know your shareholder. Nowadays there's some great ways of finding out who your shareholders are if you don't have a shareholder register. Especially the international shareholders will often be hidden still behind the nominee name on your register. So have a look at them and try and find out who they are. It's not like I named quite a few names here, but there's hundreds of other investors that could be in your top 5, and have a look at them. Find out then who they are. If you see the name Vanguard, don't just stop it there, but find out who is Vanguard and what do they stand for? Why? What is their philosophy in terms of engagement, in terms of stewardship, in terms of fiduciary duties that they are exercising for their clients?
Yeah.
There's some super websites out there as well. You can go on their websites. You can also contact the teams. And prepare yourself for the engagement process and prepare yourself for the first conversations by educating yourself. And I think the other thing is also, don't start small. Start with the big guys. Start with the BlackRocks, etc. They, especially when they have time, when it's not just before the shareholder meeting, but maybe now in the summer or in the autumn, reach out to them and try and get a meeting with them and talk to them about where your company is at this moment in time, and how BlackRock fits into this picture. You will get so many cool ideas and so much feedback from them as well. I think it's really undervalued. So yeah, don't be shy. Reach out and reach out to the masses, and don't be afraid of your size or the relationship that you don't have yet. It's all about creating it.
Yeah, absolutely. That was so insightful, Angelica. Thank you so much for the interview. I think we could have another 5 questions, but as we are kind of wrapped on time, we can do another one, maybe in season 3. But thank you so much for joining us. It was super insightful, and see you soon.
Yes, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
So, wir sind jetzt auch schon wieder am Ende des Podcasts angekommen. Ich hoffe, dir hat diese Episode gefallen. Wenn du Hilfe brauchst bei irgendwelchen Kapitalmarktthemen oder digitalen Investor Relations Themen, dann melde dich gerne unter unicornconsulting.com und buch dir einen ersten freien Consulting Call. Wir würden uns ebenfalls darüber freuen, wenn du uns auf Social Media folgst, zum Beispiel YouTube, TikTok, Instagram oder auch LinkedIn, oder wenn du einfach einen Like da lässt. Ich wünsche euch alles Gute und bis zum nächsten Mal. Eure Julia. Ciao.